Good night, everyone. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe, and I'm here live to answer your U.S. immigration-related questions. Go ahead, put your questions in the comments. That is why I'm here tonight. I am here to answer your questions about the immigration process, about coming to the United States, or even if you're living in the United States, ways that you can obtain permanent residence and your work permit in the United States. So if you are on your immigration journey, especially if you're thinking about that immigration journey, or even if you've been through that journey already and you still have questions, go ahead and put your questions in the comments, because I'm here every night at 9 p.m. to answer your questions. Now, I want to formally introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I help clients to get their green card and status in the United States. And so I also come on here to prioritize your questions and give you a chance to ask questions about how to go about doing this in your particular journey. Now, keep in mind that if you want personal legal advice, you can always call and schedule a personal consultation. I know some people, hi there, Abdul, good evening. I know some people are not very comfortable with asking their questions here. Sometimes it gets too personal. You can go to the link in my bio and it's going to take you to the website where you can contact a scheduling coordinator tonight up until 11 p.m. to schedule a consultation to discuss your issue with me and get legal advice. Now, I always say it is definitely worth getting legal advice, personal legal advice, because you walk out knowing your options. You walk out knowing whether you're on the right path, how you should approach your situation. And most importantly, if you need assistance, you can obtain it through my representation should you need it. So I want to talk about a particular topic tonight, and it is ways that you may not know about. So these are ways that people don't commonly, people don't think about in order to get status and permanent residence, as well as a work permit in the United States. So I want to talk about those little known ways. Most people know about marriage to a U.S. citizen, but there are other ways, right? It's not just, you don't have to get permanent residence just through marriage. Keep in mind that that option is there. If it's available to you, definitely. If it's a real marriage, definitely, because keep in mind that any kind of arrangement just to get married for the permanent residence, it is not legal and it will definitely lead to further problems. However, if you do end up in a situation where you're with a partner and a U.S. citizen partner, or even a legal permanent resident partner, and you can go through that process, by all means pursue it. However, there are other ways that I want to talk about that people don't usually think they can qualify for. Now, I want to remind you though that as I am talking, you can still go ahead and put your questions in the comments, and I will stop to prioritize your questions. So don't think that your questions have to be related to my topic. As long as they're immigration related, I will go ahead and answer your question as soon as that question comes in. Now, let's talk about those ways. So if you are here and you are without status, can you still go ahead and get permanent residence if you're not married to a U.S. citizen? So yes, there are ways. And the one way that a lot of individuals don't know about is if they're being mistreated by certain relatives. It includes by being mistreated by a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident spouse. However, it doesn't just include a spouse. It includes other types of relatives. So for example, if you're under 25 and you have a U.S. citizen or legal, hi there 49 Drake, or you have a legal permanent resident parent and that parent mistreated you, then you can apply for permanent residence and a work permit on your own. Also, if you're the parent of a U.S. citizen who's 21 and up or up, and that citizen has a history of mistreating you as their parent, you can also apply for this. So another thing is mistreatment. A lot of individuals think that, and also I want to mention here, if you're divorced, so a lot of people, they do get married, and they get married to a qualifying relative, such as a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. However, they end up divorced, and they end up divorced because they were being mistreated. In a case like that, you could possibly apply for your own permanent residence and work permit, and most importantly, get to stay in the United States, even if you're out of status, and in some cases, even if you came into the country without permission. This is a way that you could still go ahead and move forward with your life. And it includes mistreatment by a parent and mistreatment by a citizen son or daughter who's 21 and up. Now, in a case like this, you would go through the adjustment of status process. But before I get to that, I want to talk about what mistreatment means. Because one major reason why a lot of individuals miss out on applying for their own permanent residence, is that they think that they have to have a police report, they have to show physical injuries, it has to involve physical violence, and that is not true. Abuse is abuse. And in this case, if your spouse, your parent, or your son or daughter who's 21 and over, if they are subjecting you to mistreatment, to extreme cruelty, that counts, even if there's no physical violence. So suppose a U.S. citizen filed for you before you was 18, does it qualify you for citizenship? So there is a possibility. So if a U.S. citizen files for you and as a parent, so you would not, if it's a spouse, you would not gain a permanent resident. However, if you were the child of a U.S. citizen, as soon as you may, now this is where you definitely have to schedule the consultation, because it all depends on how long was your parent a U.S. citizen for, and what were the circumstances involved. But in some cases, a child who's under 18 who becomes a permanent resident will then derive U.S. citizenship from the parent. So there are cases where, say, the parent sponsors the child, and as soon as they come into the country and become permanent residents, they become U.S. citizens. So that's where they get U.S. citizenship from the parent. But it really depends on what the situation is, whether the U.S. citizen, what became a U.S. citizen, how long have they been a U.S. citizen for, and so forth. Delion can't stress enough that consultation is very important in this case, because it can, at the end of the consultation, you or your child or whoever you're asking for could actually become a U.S. citizen or is a U.S. citizen, just depending on the circumstances involved. So great question. Keep those questions coming, because I want to let you know that I'm here to answer your U.S. immigration related questions. So keep putting your questions in the comments so that I can answer your questions. Now is the time to take advantage of a U.S. immigration attorney being here in front of you to answer questions. How often do you see that? So go ahead, put questions in the comments, and it can be anything that's U.S. immigration related. You can also learn more about me, the law firm, what I do, and contact information for the firm through the links in my bio. Also, I just want to let you know that I will be here up until 9:30, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. I will be going over to Instagram to start my scheduled live there. And so if you really would like to, if I didn't get to your question, or you want to continue to listen and learn and absorb some of this information, you can hop on over to Instagram and there are individuals who ask questions there as well. And so I know that you may be watching and you may be learning from other people's questions, not necessarily asking yourself, and that can be valuable as well. So at 9:30, just go to the link in my bio. The link to Instagram is right there in the link. And I also use the same handle as here, the immigration attorney. So, hey, can you please let me know the current status of the H-1B wage rule proposed? So that I would have to review. So I don't have any current updates on that. So keep your questions coming so I can answer your U.S. immigration related questions. So put your questions in the comments. So the topic that I'm talking about is ways that you may not have known you can get permanent residence or status in the United States to go on to work here, to stay here and get permanent residence and go on to a path for permanent residence. Now, what you can, if you're for your husband, so if you file for your husband and you put it in today, when is he going to get his work permit? So the work permits right now, it's taking about 6 to 8 months from the time that you apply. So unfortunately, it is terribly backlogged. It used to take 4 months. Now it's you're looking at 6 to 8 months. If so, how long does it take? So wifey Renee, I didn't see the other part of your question. So can you go ahead and retype the other part of your question? Wifey Renee, I didn't see it. But it's taking 6 to 8 months for the work permit. Now, keep in mind, in order for you to file for your spouse and for them to qualify to adjust status in the United States, they either have to, and of course apply for the work permit, they either have to be maintaining legal status in the United States. That usually does not mean a visitor's visa, because the status that they have to maintain has to continue until the process is over. And you could be looking at a 2-year process or a 2-year process or a 5-year process, depending on what your status is. If you're a green card holder applying for your spouse, you're looking at a 2-year process. So if your spouse is out of status and you're a U.S. citizen and they fell out of status because they overstayed, then generally speaking, spouses of U.S. citizens who end up overstaying can adjust status in the United States, even with the overstay. Is there a way for someone to change status from a work visa to permanent residence? That could be possible. So it could be possible under employment-based immigration. So for example, if you are on an H-1B, for example, and your employer decides to sponsor you, then there is a way to go from H-1B to permanent residence, as long as you can maintain your H-1B for the entire duration of that process. Then there is that process. If you have a qualifying relative and you can maintain your status for the duration of the period, or if you're the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, that's the only exception here. Is if you're the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, that means you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen, you're the parent of a U.S. citizen who's 21 and up, or you are the son or daughter of a U.S. citizen who is under 21 and unmarried, then you could stay and basically fall out of status and still go on to qualify for adjustment of status. However, in any other category, you'd have to make sure you qualify either through family or an employer or through humanitarian means. But in this case, we're talking about going from a work visa to permanent resident. So it's going to be employer or family in order to do that. So it really depends, Monamat, on your particular circumstances. That's where it's very important to get a consultation to determine. Because, for example, if you're on that J1 visa, there is that if you are subject to a 2-year foreign residency requirement, that's going to be a problem to go adjust status in the United States, because that 2-year foreign residency requirement basically requires you to go back to your country for 2 years before you can get another status. So that's important to know. There are waivers available that allows you to go around it, but that depends on what your particular circumstances are. What happens when someone chooses to have a baby in the US? Wouldn't they by ways, let's see. So what happens when someone chooses to have a baby? Doesn't that violate a visitor's visa? So not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily violate the visitor's visa, because a violation of the visitor's visa is basically if you come here, you have the baby and you stay, and your intention was to stay. So if you came in knowing that you were going to stay and have your baby, that could they could view that as a potential violation of the visitor's visa. However, where it does create problems is if you come here, you have the baby, and then and officers don't like to see that too. Even now, keep in mind, officers don't like to see when you have a visitor's visa and you had a baby here, and they will often look into whether you received Medicaid in order to pay for the cost, and that can definitely affect your visitor's visa. Keep those questions coming, because I'm here to answer your U.S. immigration related questions. Now, keep in mind that I am here from 9 to 9:30 every night. However, we don't have to stop this conversation here. We can hop on over to Instagram. I will be going over there for a scheduled live at 9:30. And so you can hop on over there to continue this conversation with me and to continue to ask your questions if we run out of time. But in the meantime, keep putting your questions in the comments, and I will go ahead and answer your questions. I've been touching on ways that that people don't really think about, where you can obtain permanent residence or status in the United States. And so I talked about VAWA, and that's basically where a certain U.S. qualifying relatives, such as a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident spouse, or if you're under 25, a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident parent, or a citizen's son or daughter 21 and up are mistreating you verbally, emotionally, mentally, financially, then this could be a path. If you're here in the U.S., you are experiencing this, of course, but you didn't think that this was a solution. It is. Abuse is abuse, and it doesn't matter what that you weren't physically harmed. If you were mentally, emotionally harmed, financially harmed, that is abuse as well, and it counts. There are ways. Now, when you're applying for this, the next question I get is, well, I don't have any evidence. How am I going to prove this? And it can be done through a detailed statement, and that's what I help my clients to do, as well as a psychological assessment of your situation to really drive home to the officer why this was abuse. Also through other credible evidence, such as text messages, recordings that can be transcribed, and any other types of evidence that indicate that you were being verbally, emotionally, financially mistreated or abused, or subjected to extreme cruelty. Hi there, good night, Amelie. Can you apply for the green card and work permit at the same time? Absolutely. So when you're doing an adjustment of status in the United States, that's exactly what they allow. They allow you to apply for the work permit, because the work permit gives you some relief, enables you to work while you wait for the process, especially now where they're now issuing 2-year work permits because they now know everything is terribly backlogged, they want to make sure that everyone has the ability to keep working without this constant renewal every year. So can having a baby affect your eligibility of getting an H-1B visa through employment sponsorship? No, not necessarily. So if you have a child in the United States, not necessarily. You still do have to show that you would have some form of non-immigrant intent. However, unless there are additional concerns that you may have, just having a baby is not going to affect your eligibility. With the H-1B, it's mainly, first of all, will you be selected? And if you are selected, can you meet the qualification requirements in order to get the H-1B? If you're concerned about a particular situation, that is where you must get a legal consultation to get personal legal advice. You can always call and schedule a consultation, because keep in mind that this is not personal legal advice. You can go to the link in my bio where it will take you to the website. You'll see the phone number, a contact form, and as well as information about me. So Jody 4, thanks for sharing the live. I appreciate that. And Hot Stepper 4, live. Thanks for sharing the live. I appreciate that. And Royalty Mama, you are welcome. What are options for Jamaica to acquire a green card? So Jamaicans can get a green card like anyone else. They do have the options if they qualify. And it's going to be through an employer, if there's an employer who's sponsoring you, if through family members, and the length of the processing time, how to go about it depends on where you are, who your family member is. So if you are the immediate relative of a U.S. citizen, that means you're the parent of a U.S. citizen. A parent of a U.S. citizen who is 21 and up. That's an important fact to know. Or you are the son or daughter under 21 and unmarried of a U.S. citizen, or the spouse of a U.S. citizen. You are an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. That is the fastest process. Jody, thanks so much. That is the fastest process to get the permanent residence, because that takes priority. However, when you're in, for example, you're the unmarried son or daughter of a U.S. citizen who's 21 and up, then you're looking at about 6 to 7 years. If through a permanent resident, and you are looking permanent resident over 21, you're looking at 5 to 6 years. Also, I want to tell you though, that being the spouse of a green card holder or being the child under 21 and unmarried of a green card holder is going faster than normal. Right now, there's no immigration number wait list. And that means that as soon as they approve the petition, the initial petition that has to be filed, that's taking about a year to approve. It goes straight on to preparation for the interview. So you could be looking at about a 2-year process rather than the 3 or 4 year process that it used to take. And so if you are the spouse of a green card holder or the parent or the child of a green card holder under 21 and unmarried, this could be a fast way for you to get permanent residence. Now, of course, the way that you go about the process really depends on where you are. Because if you're in the U.S. and you're without status, there are different additional processes that you may have to follow. Hi, good night. After they said your case is ready to schedule a date for interview, should you look for a notice? So yes, you should definitely look for a notice, and they'll send this to you by email. They're sending this mostly by email through the National Visa Center. And they'll send you the interview letter. How about a student? I'm looking to apply for aesthetics school. Are there any options there? So it really depends on the school and whether the schools that you're applying to offers any type of international student visas in order to study those. So you'd have to look at the schools and look at your programs and determine whether they provide, whether they cater to international students. How can I apply for a business visa? So there are different types of business visas. The one that I talk about the most is the E2 Treaty Investor Visa. And that's if you are the citizen of an E2 treaty country. Right now, there are countries all across the world, but the ones that are in the Caribbean or in Central or South America are Grenada, Trinidad, Jamaica, in Central America, Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, in South America, Argentina, Bolivia. And you have to show, one, first of all, that you're the citizen of an E2 country. Those are not, the ones I listed are not the only countries. You can go to the uscis.gov website, that's the official website of the Immigration Service, and just go in the search bar, type in E2 treaty countries, and you'll get a full list. Once you have established that you're the citizen of an E2 country, you have to show that you do have a substantial investment. And substantial investment does not necessarily mean that you are you can provide millions of dollars, but it does have to show that you can provide sufficient investment to run a successful business in the US. So hot stepper, I have to hop on over to Instagram. If you want to hop on over there with me, feel free to do so. You can go to the link in my bio and it will lead you directly to Instagram, where I will be. I'm actually running late, but hot stepper, yes, if you get asylum, you have a path to residency. When you get asylum, you can apply after 1 year. Now, please meet me over at Instagram now to continue your questions and continue this conversation, because I do have a pre-scheduled live that I do every night at Instagram. So see you there. Thanks so much for your questions. And if you can't meet me on Instagram, meet me tomorrow at 9 p.m. on TikTok. Have a good night, everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon over at Instagram.